I have brought yet another craft kit from Amazon. This time it's a Terrazzo, I think that's right, craft kit. And well, let's see what we can make with it. So first off, I'm just gonna open it up and let's see what we get inside. So the first thing, these are the silicone molds. They are quite small, but from closer inspection of the box, these do say that they're actual size, which adds up. Also it pictures 2 trays, and then in the small print it says only 1 tray can be made with the contents of this kit, but I think that's probably what I'm going to try and make today. So that'll be using this mold, which looks a little bit deformed in the box, but hopefully that'll be okay. Let's see what's in the envelope. So we have our instructions, which I'll have a quick look at in a second. Some sandpaper, some sort of necklace bits if you do make the jewellery. 3 different colours. We've got green, yellow and red, which is a bit odd that it's green and not blue, but I'm sure there's a reason. 2 bags of plaster of Paris, some gloves and some mixing sticks. So this seems pretty straightforward. I'm not really sure if I needed a kit for this because it just looks like you could buy some plaster of Paris and some molds, but I'll give this a go and see if I think I get value for money. But first off, I'm just going to read through these instructions. So there are a few extra things that we need, some plastic or paper cups, tin foil or plastic wrap, and a tablespoon for measuring. I don't really want to use my sort of food tablespoons to measure this out, so I've got one of these little sort of scoops from my craft set, and I think the ratio is the important part, but I'm going to attempt to try and get 1 tablespoon and 4 tablespoons. But the first step is to make our chips. So I need to mix 1 tablespoon of water, 4 tablespoons plaster of Paris, and then colour that, spread it out on some plastic wrap foil. I've actually got some plastic packaging that would just go in the bin otherwise, and cut it so it would lie flat, and I'll use this. And we leave it for about half an hour to set, and then you can crumble it up and you'll get the chips that sort of make this cool little pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. The instructions are quite beginner friendly, but I wish they were a little more specific. For example, when spreading out the plaster for the chip, it says to spread it not too thinly, but doesn't really say how thin it should be. I wish they would give an approximation, like maybe 1 to 2 millimeters thick, so complete novices like me will have some idea of what to aim for. They also said to be cautious when adding the colour because the dyes are super pigmented. I agree that they are very pigmented, but the colours do tend to get quite a bit lighter when they dry, so I wish I had put more in. I was aiming for a sort of salmon pink and a pastel turquoise, which would stand out from the white base. Leave this to set for about half an hour, and once it's dry I should just be able to sort of crinkle up this plastic wrap and break these bits off into chips. I'm going to go wash my hands. They do include 1 pair of gloves, but it's a multi-stage process, so I feel like they should probably include more than 1 pair, but I don't mind getting my hands dirty, so I'm just going to go wash my hands, wait half an hour, and I'll see you back here. So it's been at least half an hour, probably a little bit more, and these do look like they're set. So we move on to the next stage. All I need to do is sort of break these up. Ooh, maybe I made them a little too thick because they're a little bit hard to break. So I will just break all of these up and then put those to one side for now, and then we'll move on to making the tray. So now I've got all my little chips in here. I left some of them quite big because I thought I can always make them smaller, but I can't really make them bigger. So I could end up breaking up these a little bit more. And now to move on to the base of our tray. It says to use the pre-weighed out 10 tablespoons of plaster of Paris, which I assume is a whole bag. But I'm going to try and use what's left in this bag, and then if I need more I can take a bit from that bag. But I'm hoping that I can make one with just one of these bags, and then I'll have a sealed bag to try some other things with. So I'm going to tip this into a container, add some water, and then mix it up. I just wanted to add that the mint green that I made dried a lot lighter than it looked, so I'm a little bit worried that it won't have as much contrast with the white, so keep that in mind if you try it, that the colours will sort of whiten up a little bit as they dry. So I tried to use a plastic jar to mix in. I tend to hoard things like these to use for crafts and give them one more use before recycling. Unfortunately here it was a bad idea. The shape of the jar meant that I couldn't mix it very well, and I ended up moving it into a plastic cup anyway when mixing it with the chips that I made earlier. I will also admit that not using a tablespoon was another bad move. This plaster ended up a bit thicker than it should have been. These are all user errors and I can't really fault the kit or the instructions here. Later in the video you'll see what I think is a better plaster mix and the difference that it makes. I did end up opening the second bag to have enough plaster for this tray, and I know in the instructions it did say that the bags were pre-measured to have the right amount for the tray. I just found it a bit annoying that you have to open the second bag for the chips anyway. Why pre-measure for the tray but not for any other parts of the process? I will see how this turns out, but I kind of want to try something that I've seen online, which is this kind of half and half dish. So once this is set, I'm actually going to break it and hopefully use the rest of this plaster just in one colour to make this sort of two-tone design. So time to demold this one, and I have loosened it a bit so it should just come out. Okay, you can definitely see that the mould isn't flat, so this bit here where it's kind of been pushed in, I assume in the box, yeah, has made that a little bit wonky, but I'm a bit disappointed that you can't actually see this. I assume that you're meant to use the sandpaper to sand this down and then it will reveal itself a bit more, but because I want to try that two-toned one, I'm gonna have to break this. So okay, so because I don't have much plaster left, I think I'm going to take the bigger side and pop that back in the mould, and then I'm going to mix up some more of the plaster, try to match probably the sort of mint green blue chips, and then just pour that in here, and then once it's completely done I will sand it down. And then this bit I guess I could just break up and use for future projects. Might give this another go and just buy some more plaster of Paris. Let me know what you'd like me to try out next in the comments below. So here you can see I tried to be a little more precise with the measurements and mix the plaster in a cup, and it turned out way better, silky smooth and way more pourable. So now it's come time to demold this with this heart. So I'm just gonna loosen it around the edges, and then hopefully it should just slide out. You can definitely see where the join is because it's not flat, but I think I can just sand that down. So for a beginner, I don't think this is too bad. I definitely think I'm going to get some plaster of Paris and just give it a go with some more different techniques. But I think this one, I'm quite happy with it at the moment. I'm going to let it dry out a little bit before I sand it, and hopefully I can sand it so that it sits flat. But before that, I do want to just use up this teeny bit of leftover plaster that we do have. And this kit also came with these little jewellery moulds which seem perfect for this, and I've seen a few techniques online that I want to try out where you kind of paint the design and then cover it over. So I'm thinking one that I've seen is chili pepper, and yeah, I'll have a few thoughts what I can do with this sort of turquoisey green, red and yellow, and I'll go to a time lapse and see if you can guess what I'm attempting to draw before the reveal. I wanted to experiment with the leftover plaster, and the first experiment was to try different dyes. This black dye is one that I used for resin, but it completely did not mix with the plaster, so that was a fail. Any extra plaster that I ended up with, I spread out on plastic wrap, and I could potentially use this as chips in future projects. I was surprised by how well the plaster could be painted. I used a small paintbrush and a sculpting tool. It obviously didn't behave exactly like paint, but I can definitely think of ways to use this technique when I try it again. These are drying, and putting some on the plastic wrap is actually a great idea, because once that's dry I'll know that these are ready to be coated. I will move that to one side, and I'm going to attempt to sand back some of this, and there's a few voids and things, so it's not perfect, but for my first attempt I think it went pretty well, and I've learned a lot from it, particularly the consistency of the plaster that you want. So I'm going to sand this back and see if I can get a reasonable result. So I don't think the tiny bit of sandpaper they give you is enough, but also this has been drying for over an hour now, this white side, and it's just not really working. It's still clogging up the sandpaper. I also think this is really fine sandpaper, and you probably want to start with something a little bit rougher and then work your way up to this grit. But with that in mind, I think I might call this done for now. I might potentially clear it up off camera and show you the end result. So this is it, before, with a very wonky bottom. As you can see, this bit's very bobbed up and a very uneven surface. And what I've done is kind of Google different kits that I could try, and this is the sort of Plaster of Paris kit, but there is a sort of resin one, which I think is called Jesmonite or something like that. So I've ordered one of those kits, it's arriving tomorrow, thank you Amazon, and I'm going to give that a go as well and then compare the two. I'm interested to see how you can make chips and stuff out of the resin one, if it works exactly the same or not. But for now I'm going to put this to one side. I think I made the initial plaster too wet for these designs, and looking back at the footage now, the pattern was not set before I covered it in yellow, and I'm not sure the pattern would have ever set with the ratios that I mixed. They don't give you much dye in the kit, and I ended up using all of the yellow for just these small pieces, including adding water to the bottle to try and make sure I got every single drop. The bottles are also tiny, which makes them really difficult to squeeze, and a child or anyone with dexterity issues would really struggle here. The colours themselves I think are a little odd. Really, you have a bright yellow, and then an orangey pinky red, and then a sort of turquoisey blue green, which means it could be hard to predict how they would mix together, and you might not be able to get the exact colour that you're aiming for. I've used all of the plaster that's come with this kit, and for that I got probably about a cup's worth of chips once I chip these up, and I got a tray and a third, and then these ones. So you could definitely fill all of these ones with the amount, and have one tray and one of each of these, and probably a little bit left over. I'm gonna wait until these dry to demold them, and then I'll show you the results of my experiments. And I think this looks nice. I just think there's better techniques potentially for making sure that it shows through without having to sand it. So I do think I'm going to have to sand this back to really make a piece of it, and potentially fill in some of these voids somehow. I'm not sure how now that I've used all the plaster, but I'm also going to wait for that other kit to turn up and give that a go and compare the two. So I'm not exactly sure when that video will go out, but let me know in the comments below if there's anything that you've seen that I've done that's really wrong, or anything that you want me to try in the next video. So it's been way over an hour, I kind of forgot about these, so we will demold them and see if there's a reason you're not meant to leave them in for more than an hour. So this little bit is snapped off, but that's okay because I'm not really intending to use these as jewellery anyway. But let's see if we can get these guys out in one piece. I think they might just shrink if you leave them there in too long, so you don't want to come off. Oh, there we go. And you probably guessed this one because I did mention it. So this was my attempt at chili peppers. A few of them look okay. And we'll go for this one next. And oh dear, this was my attempt at strawberries, but they've just kind of ran everywhere. So I think I didn't leave the bottom layer long enough to fully set, and it's kind of dispersed into the next layer. Oh, okay, these are probably the worst ones. These are meant to be watermelons, but they're actually still wet on both sides. So I think, in fact, the green's just coming off. So I think I didn't mix these up very well. But again, I've learned a lot. The chili peppers actually came out the best, but that's probably because they had the longest to set. But this is a technique that could work, and I'm probably going to explore it some more. And I did go ahead and sand the little tray, and I will show you that now. So this is how my tray ended up. It looks a lot better. I'm happy with these speckles. Annoyingly, I decided that I didn't want to hand sand the underside and tried to use a power tool, and it broke. But on the plus side, I guess I can just put this in the mould and do it again. Overall, I'm happy for my first attempt. I think I just need to be a bit more gentle when finishing it off, and maybe a bit less gentle when adding the colours, because I do think this is all quite muted. But I'm going to give the resin version of this a try and see which one I prefer. The kit itself was pretty affordable. I'll put the Amazon link in the description below, and whilst you could likely get all the parts for cheaper on Wish or similar sites, this kit saves you the hassle and is not overly expensive.